Good morning, and we're joined today by probably what is one of England's greatest freedom fighters of the moment, Lawrence Fox, the great Lawrence Fox, I would say. And even greater because, of course, what we've found out this weekend is not only is Lawrence Fox an extraordinary actor, an extraordinary freedom fighter, but he has also proved himself to be one of the finest shots in England.
I'm not sure about that. I was quite good. Did get quite good by the end, though.
You did very, very well, and I have to say your loader was extremely impressed.
It was lovely.
Everybody just had a wonderful day, and thank you so much for.
It's so lovely to do something which is part of the traditions of the country, and you can also, take a double brace of partridge back home and get the kids plucking them and eating them, so that in their own way they can understand what it goes into killing something and eating it.
No, and you're absolutely right, and I think it's important that we respect where food comes from, and children understand where food comes from, and we certainly had one for the pot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. We really did. Anyway, it's lovely to have you here, and thanks so much for coming down. Obviously, hot on the heels of the sort of by-election, I personally feel that you did a tremendous amount to ensure that the government got a bloody nose, and that wasn't necessarily reflected in the vote count, but certainly in terms of injecting what I would say your philosophy into the debate is so important. And I just wondered if you wanted to reflect on that and sort of what would, because it's the first time perhaps you've had the opportunity to sort of talk about.
I managed my expectations anyway, because I think that that election was very much about, when I was up there was very much about rage at the Tories. So I think that I don't mind at all about how many votes we got. I'm really pleased that the Tories are out. I think the Lib Dems aren't brilliant, but I think that those that went out and voted wanted to make sure that Neil Shaftesbury-Hurst didn't get in. So they would have seen a vote for us as a wasted vote. But everybody got a bloody nose except the Lib Dems. And if all the small parties combined, if you combined all the small parties, that combination of votes wouldn't have been enough to get a deposit back. So even with the legacy of the Brexit Party, Reform did pretty poorly as well. And I think there's a genuine need to work out what our job is as a smaller party. So 40,000 people in North Shropshire watched our content. I thought the campaign was fantastic. There's nothing I would have changed about it at all. And I think our message, which was the Tories have lost control, let's get rid of them, resonated. So whether it manifested itself in a vote share or whether it manifested itself in the fact that our message, people watched it, it's a huge number of people to have voluntarily watched your own content, and I think it's good. I think it was a strong message to the government that they've overstepped the mark. They behaved abysmally over the COVID, and they've behaved abysmally over. Look, Lord Foster's resigned. What does that say about the Conservative government? The man that was brought in, Boris's promise was to get Brexit done. Lord Foster was brought in to get it done, and now he's quit. So what's the point in Boris?
No, it's. I mean, there are indicators that the wheels are falling off the trolley very, very rapidly, in fact. And I know a number of our personal friends who perhaps aren't as outspoken as we are, very privately in dinner conversations and what I would say establishment circles are very, very disappointed with Boris, and frankly, in their words, not mine, consider he's a bloody idiot. And I think I also wanted to say I think Martin Daubney is a spectacular fellow, and I think he did a fantastic job up there, and
stunning job.
People love him really. He's really has listened to what people want, and I think it's a great shame that he couldn't have done better, but I don't think his story is over by a long shot. I think he's got a massive future.
No, it's also, this is what I mean by this, what is the job of the small parties? Is it, there's every chance that the next by-election we won't stand anybody because we're not going to, we're too little at the moment. People are just starting, people know who I am, a lot of people know who I am, and a lot of people know who Daubs is. But, there's every chance you could go into an area where there's a by-election and just ruin it for the incumbent Tory. That, and do it that way, rather than even having to stand a candidate. Because, there was a lot of love for us.
Of course.
And the message, I think, was absolutely on point, was very timely, was beautifully delivered, and that's what it is. But, are they going to elect us to run stuff at the moment? No.
Well, and I think, as you said last night, you don't particularly want to run the country. That's not your
I'm not into
goal.
Power.
No, not at all.
One of my problems as
it's probably a blessing, actually.
I don't want to be in charge of stuff. This horrible, mendacious government, and you look at what they do with power once they've got it. They just wield it so in such illiberal, totally counterintuitive to what this great country is all about. They've just ripped it apart in 2 years. And then, did you see Fraser Nelson's exchange with the head of SAGE? He was asking, why don't you include the actual data about Omicron, as I call it? Why don't you include that? Why is it always to project the worst case scenario? And he says, well, that's what we've got to. If we don't tell you what the worst case scenario is, there's nothing to disagree with, or there's nothing, government policy can't be driven. So it's like, hang on a minute, you're telling us it's the end of the world relentlessly, which is appalling for people's mental health anyway, and you're not even basing it on facts. So you're saying follow the science. It's not to follow my failed narrative. Is what they're.
Well, it's incredibly clumsy. And of course, just skipping back, what perhaps some of our viewers don't realise is the huge reach that you have had on social media. Have you actually calculated how many minds over the last, let's say, 12 months you have actually reached?
No, I don't really, because I use social media as a sort of broadcasting platform, and as you know, my original thing is the freedom to speak your mind and have a view, which people are very upset about not having an opportunity to do. So what I do is I just enact it on social media. I use social media. So, for example, when we were in shooting yesterday, I thought, this will really upset a certain portion of the vast majority of Twitter users. So I thought, I'll stick a few of the best birds in.
Yeah.
And go ping and see where you go. And
well, a lot of people genuinely believe that food comes in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
And, they'll say, well, they have an issue with this and that. They quite happily sit down and eat a steak. My point is, would they dispatch a cow?
Yeah.
Would they do that?
I would.
Yes.
Have. Not a cow, but I've killed things and eaten them. And it's a different relationship.
Yeah, it is, and I think it makes life realer. As I say, you shot beautifully. But my issue with this extremely clumsy government, and it's something that I wanted to raise, is I don't think we're being given all the facts and all of the actual science. There's a number of doctors that are being censored, and particularly one of the indicators that I've seen, and I'd just like your thoughts on this, is what is going on with all these footballers that seem to be keeling over and either dying or at a very young age or having to resign their careers because of heart problems. And if it's happening to footballers, surely it's not just footballers, it must be hockey players as well, perhaps mere mortals such as ourselves, but because they're in the public eye and you can actually see them keeling over at football games, what is going on with these people and why is there not a public outcry about this?
Well, because they're in too deep. But do you remember, I remember Mark Vivian Foe, like how rare it was. Do you remember he just collapsed? Well, I think he was playing for Cameroon and he just keeled over and died on the pitch and everyone was in shock. And then suddenly, it's well over 100 players have now developed a career-ending heart problems. Sergio Aguero has just developed career-ending heart problems. There's what they are willing to admit, and Pfizer now do put this on their on their website, is that myocarditis, pericarditis can be the side effects of this vaccine. But because we've turned it into a religious thing, it's part of this it's a woke religion, this vaccination program. It's not about freedom of choice. You can tell, because it's not about freedom of choice. You're not allowed to debate it. You're evil if you don't do it. You're smeared and hated if you don't condone it. This is a huge public health experiment. Whether you like it or not, we are the guinea pigs for these vaccines. Now, God willing, they're a great thing, and in years to come, these mRNA things might be able to cure cancers and stuff like that. God willing, but give people the time to make their own decisions about it. And if footballers and sports people are suffering heart problems, then there should be an open and honest debate about it. But it's not. It's just you never read it in the paper. In the paper, it just goes collapsed unexpectedly. Struggled
and there's no
to breathe.
demand. And I wonder what's happened to investigative journalists. I mean, my mother, at the time that I was conceived and was, my mother was pregnant with me, was the height of the thalidomide boom. And my mother was advised to take thalidomide because it was given out as a cure, quote unquote, for morning sickness. And my mother had a very bad feeling about it, and all of her friends were taking it, and she didn't take it. And of course, later on, you saw these ghastly deformations, and one cannot feel sorry enough for the victims of thalidomide. But I don't know if you know this, but it took a Sunday Times editor, I think, 5 years to begin to expose the thalidomide scandal. And of course he was knighted at the end of it. I forget his name now, perhaps some of you out there can remember, but this was the work of one journalist. And my question to our sort of viewers out there and people watching this is, where are the real journalists of today? Where are, the strong voices in the land?
When did they turn into activists rather than journalists as well? I think
it's extraordinary.
They're paid for, aren't they? The journalists are also. I just want to quickly say, I'm not anti-vaccine. If you want to take a vaccine, by all means do it.
No, I'm not either.
So go for it. I'm not someone who says I'm anti it under any circumstances. What I am is someone who wants to make my own decision based on my own, how old I am, how healthy I am, and I want to go, well, no, given the option, I don't think it's right for me at this point. It may years down the line, but not at the moment, and that I should be free to make that choice. In turn, what were we talking about? What did you ask after that? We were talking about it took one guy.
Yeah, the thalidomide, it took him.
Yeah.
And I said, well, where are the journalists of today?
Yeah, well, you do. There are. You've got Alison Pearson, who is
marvellous.
Who's marvellous. But who is paying these guys' salaries? Who's paying for the advertising in newspapers?
You see, there you go.
The propaganda arm of the government. So whichever government regime is in charge, they pay the salaries of the legacy media who deliver us the message from the government. You only have to turn the radio on. I mean, turning the radio on in itself is the most depressing thing in the world, because all you are is just, this winter, you must do this. It's the end of the world. It's just constant. And if those are people who aren't on Twitter or aren't on different social media platforms and aren't perhaps curious in the way that other people are, they'll believe it. So they'll believe we're in the Omicron is. I think Omicron's the God variant myself, but
it could actually be a natural vaccine.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned last night that our family owns 6 newspapers in London, and because we've owned newspapers for a number of years, I have been approached so many times by various different companies to say, listen, if we put this advert in your paper, you need to write this editorial against this person.
Right.
And the average person out there doesn't really know the hand-in-glove relationship with media. Now, I've always turned that business down.
Yeah.
But I do know for sure that later on I would see those same companies with a big fat advert in one of the major newspapers and a beautifully crafted piece of editorial 3 pages down the road. And it's not editorial, it's advertorial. That's what it is. And so what we are, the mechanism of propaganda, which is pay for an advert, and then receive favourable editorial, has been well grooved into society, really for decades. This is not a new thing, but I think it's gone into overdrive, and that's why I think what you're doing and what you've done is so important, Lawrence. And I just wanted to, main reason I thought it'd be lovely for you to come down to Cornwall and experience the beauty of the Cornish countryside is to thank you and to say, my gosh, thank you for everything that you've done.
Oh, not at all. It was so nice, because you do get trapped in London, and it's hard if you don't have a view. I mean, the views from here are stunning, but if you don't have a view you don't spend the day in the open air like we did yesterday, you forget how wonderful that is for the soul. So you've lifted my spirits, and I can go back to London thinking, there's still some greatness out there, and you've you've used your voice to say the same message, and the thing is, it shouldn't matter. We should be able to talk about anything, but because there's a lightness to free speech that is so important, it brings people together. Whereas if everyone's sat there saying, "Oh, can I say this?" The same as this swimmer who's changed their wants to be a girl now, so started swimming as a female in America, and he's winning races by 36 seconds. It's a bloke. He was a male swimmer. He's now says he's a girl, and he's winning by 36 seconds. What's sad is the fact that men are allowed to ruin women's sport. That's sad.
Which is absolutely unfair, isn't it?
But what's worse is that these female swimmers on the team won't complain because they're frightened of not being able to get a job in the future. Because the trans ideology is, if he says he's a girl, and if you don't like it, we'll destroy you. Which is what woke.
They'd probably lose their sponsorship contracts, you see, or something like that. And Charlie Kirk, who's a good friend, has been very outspoken on this, as has Candace Owens. I think I mentioned we introduced Candace to her husband. So she's been beautifully sort of outspoken on this, and the way she sees it, and I think I do too, is it's where are the feminists on this? Because this is brutal to women. It's misogynistic, actually, to imagine if you're a female athlete and you've been training for best part of 10 years to get into the Olympics, and then basically some bloke says, I'm a girl, by the way, and I'm competing. Well, clearly the genetic structure of
don't have a girls'
men...
femurs, do you, mate?
No.
There are people who genuinely are transsexual.
They are.
What a massive disservice it is to those people who need loving compassion and understanding just like everybody else does, to suddenly go, well, I'm just going to change my gender so I can beat someone in a swimming race. It's a huge disservice to what it is to actually to genuinely go, I am in the wrong body, which will happen. So again, it's nuanced. It's not just like, but we don't go from something like 0.4% of the population are transgender to for no reason. Well,
I think one of the reasons is that children are now being taught this in school from a very, very early age. And some of the education that's going into the educational system is certainly not something that, in my opinion, young minds should be being exposed to.
Yeah, it's like taking them into a sweet shop and going, you can have whatever you want. They would just take whatever they wanted.
Right.
Whereas if you were going into a sweet shop and said you could have two, it's easier.
Yeah.
Kids are not built that way.
You're right. So what are your plans for the future? Because I'm, as I said to you last night in private, I think you have a massive future in both in the entertainment industry. You've obviously got this new film coming out with Hunter Biden. Tell us a little bit about that. So we shot that in, when was it, last month, and then they'll be editing it now, so it'll be out in, I'd imagine, late spring. They don't tend to mess around with these smaller independent films. It'll be interesting to see how it goes down, because it is about the laptop, what was on the laptop, the deals that he did, everything that was suppressed by this wonderful platform here, and
people, they polled Americans, I think they polled Democrats, and they said, if you'd known about all of this stuff, would you have still voted for Joe Biden? And I can't remember what the percentage was, but a significant percentage said, no, I wouldn't. So essentially, the Twitter chose who won the election.
Wow.
In a lot of ways. So it'll be interesting to get the story out. It's a very troubling story. It's very revealing of how America's behaviour is currently, certainly in regards to China and stuff like that. So, but where will it be seen? Where's it going to go on? Do you think, who's going to host it?
Well, I think the grassroots, and I think certainly our followers will what we have here from Camelot. I mean, we've reached an awful lot of people through lots of little subgroups. And what happens today is people join these Telegram channels, which I'm sure you know about, and maybe one person has a group of 20 people, and then another person has a group of 2,000 people, and then others have 20,000 people. I mean, that Jennifer Okuri, Boris Johnson's ex-girlfriend, has quite a large group on Telegram.
Does she?
Yes, she does. And so you get these little subgroups, and they share each other. And there's a lot more of that, actually, I think, going on than the mainstream media realises.
Yeah.
And you can't stop an idea. If you remember, the French Revolution was precipitated through leafleteers. I had the editor of The Light here the other day, Darren, who's a remarkable fellow who, has got his sort of grassroots publication. They're doing 250,000 copies an edition, which is, and how many people read one edition of a printed newspaper? It's probably 2 or 3. So different people have that. So I think it will find an audience. But beyond that, what's your
Well, we have to think how we're going to be effective as a political force, given the current circumstances and the current environment, the current appetite for someone to slightly lean onto the right of the Tories, or lean into it a bit, and we'll sit down and deconstruct Shropshire. I mean, I'm interested to go. You need a ground game, but the problem with us at the moment is because of the way that the banking systems are, they don't want us to be able to receive donations, in small donations. So I have to send back donations to people every day and not cash them. So what we need is to get a banking system which is able to help us, so we can have a membership. When we get a membership, you get a ground army. You get a ground army, you can grow.
Yeah, of course.
That's where we're at. But we've had such headaches trying to get just deal with banking.
You mentioned that the banks were refusing to give an official political party, which you are, a bank account.
Yeah, well, it's Elcom really, the Electoral Commission. They say you don't need to have a bank account in order to have a political party, which sounds to me ridiculous. I mean, it's a position they can adopt, but it's a ridiculous one. You should need a bank account, and I think it's a form of corruption that they make it hard. They make it as hard as possible for new parties to get going. They make it non-possible because it doesn't benefit them, does it? They don't want someone else around.
No, and how do you see? Obviously, what's going on in America at the moment? We've got quite a large American audience. Obviously, Nigel was out he interviewed Trump the other weekend, and he's pretty positive about perhaps his chances in 2024 and also in the midterms. It's looking pretty interesting. To what degree do you feel that what happens in America affects life over here in Europe?
Hugely. The American coughs or sneezes, we get a cold. We've got some horrible imports from America recently, certainly critical race theory, and I think we're probably going to be getting disparate impact stuff in from America as well soon, which is the horribleness of how racist all of these policies are under the guise of not being racist. That's what true evil is. It's the greatest trick devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist. The mayor of Camden saying, make sure you only shop in black-owned shops on the first Monday.
You are kidding.
Yeah, and you're just like, why? What? Just swap the word black for white, and what is that? That's the Ku Klux Klan. But
Yeah.
yet, for some reason, this vile critical race theory is being shoved down people's necks, and then certainly in university and even in schools. So I think we've got that coming. But I think that Britain is a little bit easier to attack because we don't have a First Amendment, so we don't have a protection of free speech.
You're absolutely right. Here's the thing, Lawrence. How far are the government going to go in terms of...
They're going to lock us down. That's what they're going to do. And then I wouldn't put it past them to try and cancel Christmas. But I think they'll probably lock us down again until people comply. You know, this is Sajid Javid didn't even rule it out. He was just interviewed on Mar this morning. He's a puppet. It's not about a virus anyway, this stuff. I'm sorry, it's not. It's become a cold and there's no reason. And if the NHS can't cope, then we need a different NHS, as Isabel Oakeshott said. I think they're going to keep trying.
Are they going to go full on Austria?
I think they would love to. Yeah, I think the plan is they've tried. I mean, if it wasn't so coordinated around the world with each country doing, you know, are they going to do Australia? Are they going to do New Zealand? Where are we going to go? All I know is that these are the darkest times that I've ever lived through, and those that fight for freedom are going to be on the right side of history. That's all I know.
Good. Well, I think we do need to fight for freedom, and I wanted to thank you tremendously.
Thank you
for everything you've done, and I'm glad you've got the opportunity to experience Camelot in its Christmas glory, in its full Christmas glory. What can one say?
I love it. It's heaven. Look at it. Magical. Beautiful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Christmas this year is an extraordinary time for all mankind. This year has seen things occur that I don't think any of us 5 years ago could possibly have imagined. And one of the things that's occurred this year is the extraordinary expansion of Camelot Castle TV and Camelot Castle TV Network. I can't thank you enough for everything that each and every one of you has done to spread the message of positivity and friendship, hope and light that we have been honoured to be able to convey from this very room. So this Christmas, we would consider it our honour if you were to join us here and experience the warmth and the care that you all have helped us create here. Very, very Merry Christmas to you all. And let us all have an extremely happy and positive New Year.